Welcome back to the in our YouTube channel, the home of album reviews, discography guides and think pieces. Now today's review is a review of the brand new Arctic Monkeys album called The Car. And to give you a bit of my history with Arctic Monkeys, I really enjoyed their debut album that came out I believe in 2004, correct that in post if not, but you know, I thought I really liked the sort of punky, raw, grimy, gritty energy, but with the kind of indie songwriting to it. I thought that was a really interesting sound that they had going on. And while they did have definitely some good songs on future projects, whether it's like 505 or Fluorescent Adolescent or She's Thunderstorms, you know, there's a few decent tracks here and there. There's nothing really that recaptured that same kind of raw, riotous energy of the debut. And even their comeback of sorts, AM in 2013 or 14 I believe it was, it just felt like, yes, there were some massive choruses on that thing, and as an album it was pretty like era defining for a lot of reasons, but it just kind of felt like very vacant arena rock, for lack of a better term, like very big and very grand, yes, but not very much else. But they took a bit of a stylistic left turn with their last album, Tranquility Base Hotel Casino in 2018, because that saw them flirting with some like lounge aesthetics, like lounge pop and glam rock, soft rock, jazz as well, but it kind of felt like the most generic versions of those styles being done. Like there was something kind of slightly campy and performative about it, which I can kind of appreciate, but it just felt like they did not, under any circumstances in my opinion, like it wasn't a terrible album as many people thought it was, but for me they made no reason whatsoever as to why it should be them doing it, if that makes sense. Like nothing about it really said like, oh, if anybody's going to do a lounge revival it should be these guys, because clearly they know what they're doing. But it just, you know, it felt like more of a kind of playing musical dress up rather than any kind of meaningful ode to a genre, if that makes sense. So I was actually quite intrigued when they announced that on their new album they would be delving even further into those styles on that album, which to me in concept is a great thing, because a lot of the kind of musical touchstones that would define those types of genres are stuff that I really like, whether it's like, you know, really lush string sections and keyboards or massive big vocal harmonies. I'm into all of that stuff, so you know, you give me enough of that with some decent songwriting behind you and you've got a good album. My only thing was, because as I say there was kind of a performative aspect to it this time around, whether obviously them going further into it could mean that they were giving themselves, you know, more of a reason to say, hey, you know, we should be doing it. If they're developing it a bit more, surely they would have like more reason as to why they should be the ones to do it, if that makes sense. But also at the same time, it felt like if they were going further into it, they could also pivot so far into self-indulgence and campiness and over-the-topness that it's just completely unbearable. And whatever side of the coin it was going to land on, I really wasn't sure. So after a few listens, here's what I thought of Arctic Monkeys' brand new album, The Car. The opener is called There Better Be a Mirror Ball, and it's actually quite impressive, to be honest, because this is, for lack of a better phrase, what I wanted from this kind of album from Arctic Monkeys. So in the intro, it's just brilliant, I think. Like the really laid back drums and subtle bass, the string sections and the pianos work brilliantly as well. It's very warm, very atmospheric, very kind of nostalgic as well. I feel like when the song kicks into full gear for the rest of the runtime, I feel like again the drums and bass work well to like foster a very subtle groove. The use of strings in the latter half is very nice. I think the use of like keyboards, what sound like kind of atmospheric pads throughout, are also done very nicely. And I think Alex Turner's vocals are also very nice throughout. They have a very sort of defined sound to them. Like it does sort of sound slightly performative with the kind of crooner style that he's going for, but I think a lot of the vocal runs and the melodies that he's hitting are very pleasant, and I think that his lyrics about the reluctant demise of a relationship are done very well and have a genuine kind of pathos to them at points that I wasn't expecting from him, so that's definitely good. My main gripe with this song though is the way the piano is played throughout most of the song, because in the intro it's fine, a lot of the really angelic atmospheric piano runs in the intro are very nice, but then following the intro, you get this weird like staccato piano break, which comes out of nowhere and just sounds really clumsy. That's sort of a really tacked on transitional point. But then for the rest of the song, as if you think it's going to go back into kind of like, you know, very angelic kind of gliding pianos, it does these very kind of staccato chords throughout the whole of the song and just throws the mood completely off, because a lot of the like main body of the song is these very kind of slow soaring melodies, and you've got the piano in the background just going bam 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 bam, and it's just really off-putting. I don't understand it. I wish that the piano flowed a bit better with the rest of the song, because apart from that, this song is a really great start in my opinion.
So if you wanna walk to the car, you ought to know I'll have a heavy heart.
The second track is I Ain't Quite Where I Think I Am, and while not being my least favourite on the whole project, is definitely a contender, because a lot of it isn't awful, but there really is some stuff that grinds my gears about this song. So for starters, I do like how the percussion and the bass sound throughout this song. Again, I think the groove is very solid here, and I think the use of strings throughout is also very nice, particularly in the kind of string-backed vocal harmony burst sections at points after the choruses here, which is quite nice. And I think Alex Turner's lyrics, at the very least, about sort of feeling like an imposter in high society are also put across in a quite a compelling way. The rest of this song, however, absolutely does my head in, because you hear those first drums that get the groove going, and then you hear this big burst of vocal harmonies, and you think, wow, this is really going to go into some like angelic, like really sort of Phil Spector grand territory. And I know that I've slagged off Phil Spector in the remasters video, but anyway, that's besides the point. But then that happens, and you're getting built up for one type of song, and then all of a sudden you get these like cheesy funk wah-wah guitars that are just the worst thing ever. They absolutely do my head in. I don't see how people can be like, oh yeah, these are fun. Like, no, they just absolutely do my head in, just like that. Wah, wah, wow, wah, 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 wah. It just sounds like a parody of funk music. And I think Alex Turner's vocals specifically as well suffer from thinking they have a lot more swagger than they actually do, because he's very clearly trying to put off like a performative crooner thing going on here, like the kind of hey bada bing bada boom, you know, that kind of I don't know what that was, but kind of that you know, sort of very sort of Tony Bennett, very full of swagger kind of crooner quality, and he just does not have the chops to fill that up at all. So it just ends up coming across kind of goofy and corny, the way it's like, oh, I ain't quite where I think I am, like it just sounds really awkward and ridiculous. So while I do like some of the parts of this song, particularly the groove and the parts where the harmonies take center stage, albeit very minimally, a lot of this song just feels like either bordering on parody or just flat out silly, for lack of a better word.
Formation displays of affection fly over. I go back and I can see both islands.
Track number 3 is Sculptures of Anything Goes, and is definitely my least favourite track on this whole album, because my god, this thing sounds ugly. I mean, like, just everything, the really overly distorted drum beat, the horrible bass, the like ugly squelching synths. Alex Turner's vocals aren't doing anything remotely interesting for a lot of this song. Like, maybe occasionally he'll hit like a note or a melodic phrase that's kind of intriguing, but there's literally nothing to his vocal performance. It's so flat, and combine that with the really muddy, squelchy, horrible instrumental for most of this track, and it's just ridiculous. And also the lyrics kind of rub me the wrong way a little bit as well, because while it is kind of framed within the concept of a breakup, or two people who have broken up kind of thinking about their past relationships in a kind of bitter way, apparently what this is supposed to parallel is Alex Turner kind of taking aim at fans who don't like their new sound. So like lyrics like sorry to pierce your bubble of relatability speak to that, and there's a couple of other ones, but it's like that just seems so petty and indignant, and like the worst thing you can do when like pivoting into a new sound is openly address it, particularly after you've done it once, people didn't like it. The worst thing to do is to go, oh, you didn't like it? Well, guess what? We're still doing it, so you're just gonna have to sit down and deal with it, dickhead. Like, it just really, it's really petty and just ridiculous. I swear to God. But I would say the touches of strings, organs and keyboards and all that stuff throughout particularly the latter half of the song, is genuinely the only thing that gives this song a shred of credibility, because it just sounds super ugly otherwise.
Blank canvases lent against gallery walls.
The fourth track is Jet Skis on the Moat, and is one that I did quite like, but I'm also slightly mixed on in places, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So overall, I did really like the very pillowy, dreamy, atmospheric vibe that this track puts across overall, because I feel like the keyboards and the way they're played are done very nicely again in that very dreamy way. I think the funk guitars work much better here than they did on track 2, probably because they're going for a bit more of a psychedelic vibe this time around, and so I think they mesh in a lot better with the more chilled out vibe of the song. And again, I think that the groove coming from the drums and the bass is done very nice, and particularly Alex Turner's lyrics about kind of the willful denial of the problems in a relationship. So essentially at one point posing the question of like, would you rather address the problems and kind of come face to face with conflict, or just ignore them and see our friendship or relationship just essentially crumble before your eyes, which is a really harrowing lyrical sentiment, but one that I think is done decently well, I would say. But again, there are some things about this track that do irk me. So like the staccato pianos, again, you had such a dreamy, pillowy vibe going on, really suited the track, very chilled out, very, you know, that kind of thing. But then you get these pianos that are just like very staccato, big chords playing throughout the song. It's just like, this doesn't fit at all. Like, all you need is some kind of like angelic melody line to go over the top that the piano plays, and that would have been fine. But instead you've got like these really big bombastic chords playing throughout the song. It just doesn't fit. And I think that Alex Turner's vocal performance, while I do commend his lyrics, his vocal performance is definitely much too hushed for its own good. Like, I get that this track is supposed to be very chilled out, but it's like he almost went so far that way that it's almost nondescript, or it is descript but for the wrong reasons. Like, it's so hushed and it's so like, you know, quiet that like you almost want him to give it a bit more, despite how chilled out the track is, because he just almost isn't even present on his own song, it seems like, at points. So while I do very much like a lot of the instrumental ideas put forward here, and the lyrics are very compelling too, there's just the odd thing about the way certain instruments or vocals are performed that kind of leaves a bit of a weird taste in my mouth, but a pretty strong song nonetheless.
Is there something on your mind? Or are you just happy to see?
The track at the halfway point is Body Paint, and one that has a fair few positives, yes, but also quite a few palpable negatives that I'll get into, because I do think that the drums and bass, yet again, work very well here, and I also think that the touches of what sound like harps and piano actually complement the drums and bass fairly well. They've kind of done away with the staccato piano for now, and are actually delivering some decently melodic lines that play through not only the piano but also on the harp as well, which sound really nice particularly. And I think that Alex's vocals are decent too, and the lyrics about kind of wanting to remain in contact seemingly with a past lover, and the regret over the demise of the relationship is done fairly nicely as well. So there are definitely positives to this song, but there are also quite a few things that just bring it down, and from what I can see, in a quite unnecessary way. The main thing for me with this song is the strings, because there have been strings on basically every track previously, and they've worked well for the most part, but it seems like here they're almost kind of just tacked on for the sake of it. Like, you know, they just seem really overly loud at some points, like they're super overpowering, because this track I think is meant to be at points quite quiet. So you've got like the drums and the bass and the piano and the harp going with Alex's vocals that sound nice, but then you get these like massive bursts and walls of strings that just completely overpower the track for no good reason. The kind of solely string and vocal, like Disney-esque passage around the 135 mark does come across a little odd, and particularly the worst thing for me with this song is the crescendo in the second half, if you want to call it that, because it feels like they really try to get this really overly dramatic, like bombastic ending, but it just comes across really clumsy, because they had this really kind of very atmospheric, very kind of ornate vibe going with a lot of the arrangements here, but then to just kind of pile on this really kind of noisy, wild electric guitar in the second half that just like is so much louder and so much grimier and so much kind of less ornate and less kind of well groomed than all the other instruments, if you like. It just sounds like a really odd fit, and they were just like, oh, guys, we need a crescendo moment, what do we do? And they were just like, okay, I don't know, just like put a guitar on there or something, and it doesn't fit with the song at all, in my opinion. So while there are definitely some positives here, there are also a fair few negatives that, for all intents and purposes, probably could have been avoided.
Still a trace of body paint on your legs and on your arms and on your face. There's still a trace of.
The next track is the title track, and is kind of a repeat in for many ways of the previous track, in that it's a track that I do like at its core, but could definitely have benefited from doing less, if that makes sense, because I do very much like the way the pianos and the bass and the acoustic guitars sound in the intro. I think it's a very nice, very quaint combination that works quite nicely. I think the flourishes of keyboards are very nice as well, and Alex's vocals about kind of holiday nostalgia are put across quite nicely, and I do think that the kind of subtle, brushed, almost jazzy drums that play throughout much of the track are very effective as well. But again, it's what Arctic Monkeys, they have that good song at its core, but then the stuff that they add to it is what ends up ruining it. Because while I do like the more subtle brushed drums on the track, the kind of touches or flourishes of what sound like orchestral drums, like those big sort of like bomb 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 kind of drums going on, there's a lot of those sort of flourishes throughout the track that just really take me out of the vibe of the song, because they just seem like they're tacked on there for no good reason. And again, the strings on here sound so overpowering that it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, it was pretty bad on the last track, but here it's also incredibly noticeable. And again, there was really no need for like this super fuzzed out noisy guitar solo near the tail end of the track, because this track, I can get the other one kind of going for a bit more of a grandiose thing, because there was at least somewhat of a build going on, whereas here it does definitely seem like they want to kind of sit and kind of relax in this very chilled out vibe, which I would have liked them to do, but they're like, oh no, we probably need to like up the stakes a bit more so people don't find it boring, so just put like a really fuzzed out guitar solo on there, and it just doesn't sound good. Like, again, it's a good song at its core. The drums, the bass, the guitars, the pianos, Alex's vocals and his lyrics are fine, but it's like the overpowering strings and the orchestral drums and, you know, the weird fuzzed out guitar solo, it's the things they add to the song that ruin it, because the song at its core, as I say, is quite strong.
But it ain't a holiday until you go to fix.
Track number 7 is Big Ideas, and is probably the track on this album that I find it most difficult to talk about, primarily because while there are things I like about this track, like I think the groove and the pianos and the strings work quite nicely together in the instrumental works quite well throughout this song, I would say. Just like, there's nothing too stand out about it, but it works nicely, and I think Alex's vocals and lyrics about the kind of anxiety involved in fulfilling your ambitions are done quite nicely as well. But again, it comes down to that thing of that a lot of this song is so much more nondescript than pretty much every other track that follows it. Like, yeah, the drums and the bass sound nice and the pianos work well with it and whatever, and Alex's lyrics are quite interesting, but like his vocal performance is just so middle of the road that it's almost indescribable. And then, you know, there's nothing about any of the melodies or the grooves on this song, as nice as they might be in principle, that really make me interested in this song at all. Like, it's good, but it's not even good. It is like vaguely pleasant, and it does the bare minimal in order to be vaguely pleasant. Like, the instrumental's fine, Alex's vocals are middle of the road, the lyrics are sort of vaguely compelling, I suppose, but like, I don't know, I do like the lyrics. I'd say the lyrics are probably the strongest part of this whole song, but the rest of it is just like not quite nondescript enough to the point where it's offensive, but there's really nothing that jumps out at you about it.
Big ideas, the band was so excited, the kind you'd rather not share over.
The 8th track is Hello You, and is another one that kind of signals the album's downhill spiral for me, because while again I like the drum grooves and the bass seem to be the one redeeming quality about much of this album, I feel like a lot of the melodies and the way they're done here are really slapdash. Like, there's no real one strong melody coming through, apart from that one synth line that repeats throughout the song that is admittedly pretty catchy. There's no real strong melody, partially because it's like every instrument that has any melody to it aside from that one keyboard line, whether it's the strings or like what sounds like a clav or, you know, some kind of organ or whatever, they all just kind of like pop in for 2 seconds at a time to play some like random melodic phrase and then pop out again. It's like beep beep boop, beep 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 boop, beep 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 boop. Like, it's just really all over the place. Like, there's no strong semblance of melody coming through in anything apart from, again, as I say, that one keyboard line. And Alex's one trick vocal delivery is really starting to get old, and the self-referential lyrics about, like, you know, the dawning of a new style and the music business and how everything's about profit, so we're just doing what we want to do because we like to do it. Like, listen, man, right? I don't care enough about your shift in sound to hear you sing 2 songs about it on the same album, alright? Like, I just don't care. That being said though, I do quite like how the strings sound in the second half of this song, primarily because they do have quite a strong melody to them, and they're not quite so overpowering to the point where it's just obnoxious, so I do quite like those, although the use of tambourine to add to the drum groove in the second half does get annoying quite fast, also because it seems to like go upwards in volume over time. So like, it's like at a normal volume at the start, but then it just, for whatever reason, maybe it's just me, the tambourine seems to get louder, or maybe it's just because it goes on for longer, it comes across more obnoxiously. But like, yeah, so there's the odd thing or two I like here and there about this song, but this one is probably the oddest of the whole bunch. Like, it's not awful, but there's a lot of it that just is really head scratching. The penultimate track is Mr. Schwartz, and is a bit of a pickup admittedly, but not groundbreaking by any means. I mean, I like the combination of the melodic elements here. I think the bass, the guitars, and what sound like mallets or maybe glockenspiels of some kind are very nice. They have this very atmospheric again, but also slightly melancholic vibe to them, which I like a lot. And while Alex Turner's vocals are essentially wallpaper, like they've been doing essentially the exact same thing for 8 out of the 10 tracks on this whole album, but I do quite like the occasional melody line that his voice hits on here, particularly when it goes into that kind of more almost sinister, melancholic register that fits with the song quite well, in my opinion. And I think in his lyrics, the portrayal of a character who is kind of equally sort of self-conscious, but also, you know, wants to be liked, and is kind of this very mysterious, foppish kind of you know, very kind of enigmatic figure. I do think the character portrayal put forward in the lyrics is quite a compelling one. So while that's mostly good, my only gripe with the instrumental is that while I do like a lot of the melodic elements here, I think the mallets play off the pianos very well, I think the guitars work well with the bass to foster that vibe that they're going for. I think that the addition of drums that sound kind of a lot bigger than everything else in the instrumental, but also a lot more frenetic and moving, lead to the instrumental with the drums sounding quite clumsy, which is a real shame because all of the melodic stuff on top of it, at least in my view, is done very well. So while I do definitely like quite a few things about this song, it does definitely reek, maybe more than any other track here, of squandered potential, because again, I love a lot of the melodies coming through in the instrumentation here, but there's some of the stuff to do with the rhythm and Alex Turner's vocals just being for the most part horrifically background just don't, it stops me from saying that this song is truly great, and for the most part I can just say that it's pretty good, which I would like to say more than that, but I can't really, which is a shame.
Mr. Schwartz is staying strong for the crew. Wardrobe lint rolling your...
And with that we reach the final track, Perfect Sense, which is a bit of an anticlimax and also kind of a repeat of the last song, in that I really like a lot of the stuff that's going on melodically and lyrically here, but the rhythmic stuff just completely ruins it. I mean, not only is it underwhelming because it's the shortest track here, but it's also underwhelming just because Arctic Monkeys maybe have like a needless like demand for self-sabotage. I don't know what it is. Anyway, I feel like the acoustic guitars and the strings work really, really well here to again put forward that very pillowy, atmospheric vibe, but with some very nice melodies to accompany it. I feel like the strings, again, while a lot of the strings on this album have felt quite overpowering at points, these are done with a decent amount of tact and grace that I like. And I feel like Alex Turner actually sounds like he is half awake and not just falling asleep at the wheel, because I think like not only is his vocal delivery slightly more lively than it has been on a lot of the tracks previous, but I also quite like some of the stuff he's doing melodically here, particularly on the chorus with the melody that he runs through there. And I feel like his lyrics, again, are quite strong. Not like, they are emotional, but not in a kind of sentimental, overly saccharine way, because they are to do with like the realization of aging and the passing of time, and you know, the difficulty in kind of coming to terms with that. But it's not done in that kind of overly, oh woe is me, I'm gonna die soon kind of way that would just really not work well. But you know, so the lyrics are strong, the vocals are strong, a lot of the melodies are strong too, but the drums here are really just like, they do not fit the song at all. Like, not only are the main drum kits so like overly large and booming and like reverb to hell that they just sound ridiculous, but the addition of tambourine at points as well gets really annoying. So you've got a great melodic bass with some really nice vocals and some compelling lyrics too, but then you've got these really overly like boomy and reverbed drums backed with these annoying tambourines that just completely throw away the potential that the song could have had, because there was tons of potential here. And actually, I think if you got a better drum beat behind it, this would have been a great closer, but no, we got something like this instead, which is really, really like, I wish that they just had the restraint to kind of go, hey, you know guys, maybe this doesn't sound good, but like they just did it anyway. So while I would like this song to be a lot better, and it had the obvious way to be better, is just to like not piss up your producing, but I don't even know what I'm saying. I think this song for me is more frustrating than maybe any other song off the whole album, just because it so clearly could have been great. And so it's like, why would you sabotage yourself like that?
That's what it takes to say goodnight.
So, what did I think of Arctic Monkeys' brand new album, The Car? Well, while I did definitely prefer it to their previous album in how it delved more into that kind of lounge pop, glam, soft rock sound, and did it with a more unique flair, admittedly this time around, like it didn't just feel like parody, most of the time anyway, so I feel like they are getting more distinct in this lane, and they are giving themselves more of a reason to do this sound. I feel like while there were like the odd good moment here and there, particularly towards the beginning and some towards the end too, I feel like rarely ever was there anything that made me truly step back and go, I would want to listen to this again. Like, there is basically nothing aside from like a couple of tracks in the opening, maybe towards the end too. Like, there's very, very little here that warrants repeat listens. And as I say, because you're dealing with lounge and like soft rock genres that can by proxy tend to kind of just slip into the background by nature of being what they are, the fact that they don't really seem to do a lot that's very interesting with a lot of the songs, particularly in the latter half of this album, just leaves it to feeling very forgettable, very background, very wallpaper. It felt like they had an idea of the kind of album they wanted to make and the kind of sounds they wanted to explore, but not the songs or the ideas to back it up. So this whole thing, despite a few good ideas, just ends up feeling very, very forgettable, and at points actually quite annoying. So as for a score, I'd probably go for a decent 5, because there were a handful of decent moments here, but mostly either just incredibly background or slightly irritating. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider liking and subscribing. It would really mean a lot to me. Not So Forensic Record Society, episode number 10 is coming out next, so keep your eyes peeled. There is also, from the 4th to the 18th, so the 4th, 11th and 18th, there is an album coming out every week, 3 weeks on the trot, so I will have plenty to review there. There's albums from Joji, Quedeca and Lowlife that I'll be reviewing all of them, don't worry about that. Kate Bush discography guide should be finished by the end of November. I think, yeah, it definitely should be finished by the end of November, so keep your eyes peeled for that. We're actually getting quite close to 200 subscribers as well. I think we're on 181 at the moment, which is brilliant. And, you know, so maybe I should start thinking what I want to do for the 200 subs. Although I think, as I said, I did have an inkling as to what I wanted to do, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, lots of content still to come, especially in the coming weeks. And until then, I'll see you all later.